and there's so many missteps in this process. If I'm fair to myself, I was destabilized by the loss of Sule completely. Right after his funeral, we're all just devastated and looking around the table like, do we continue this or not? And then I said, okay, if we're going to keep doing this, and I was inspired by what they said. It's like, which of one of you is going to step up? Or, and it doesn't need to be one because there's a massive shoes to fill, but then a number of you need to step up, to take over some of these responsibilities. And that's where it went quiet.
From Escape Collective, this is Overnight Success, the podcast about the entrepreneurs, the personalities, and the passionate people who make up the sport of cycling and the stories behind the icons they've built. Mikel Delagrange is the reluctant face and spokesperson behind Team AMANI. Some people call him Michael, it's spelled Mikel, and he gets called both. I like Mikel, I think it sounds cool. He says that he's the head cheerleader of Team AMANI. But after the project's founder, Sule Kangangi, tragically died in a high-speed crash at a gravel race in Vermont, Mikel was left to lead the mission. To understand the man now guiding the ship, you have to look back at his roots in Miami, Florida, raised by a Cuban mother and a stepfather who was a Jewish trial attorney who used the family dinner table as a practice jury.
And I just came at some point to admire the logic that went into it, the human approach, trying to be able to convey and get an emotive response from people concerning, the plight of another human being.
Mikel originally attended university on a football scholarship, and when a camp injury ended his days as a fast-twitch wide receiver and quarterback, he pivoted to the world of endurance cycling. Yet, while his sport changed, his professional focus never wavered. Inspired by those dinner table legal debates, he spent 9 years laser-focused on his education, driven by a singular mission to practice international law.
So my first international job was Cambodia. And in fact, where I met my wife, we were working in the Khmer Rouge Tribunal. And then from there, I went to work in Nepal. I was working in the civil war that took place there in the early 2000s. And then my wife gave me an ultimatum, an offer I couldn't refuse. So I had to come back to The Hague, which I was telling her I thought it was too early for us, that we should be, cutting our teeth in all of these fights. But she had already started working at one of the institutions in The Hague for the former Yugoslavia. So yeah, I came back and then started working at the International Criminal Court.
Do you even identify as a nationality with, the amount of travel you do and where you've lived and that, or do you identify as being American or?
Yeah, no, I do. I'm for sure. With all of the warts and all of the crap that comes with it, I think it's more complicated for me, the squaring the American and the Cuban, because I very strongly identify with Cuba and that culture and the history. Very proud of it as well. And the two of those cultures are increasingly at odds with each other. And so that one is more complicated to square, I think, than an American in Europe.
And with, your job and career and it taking you to Africa, the relationship you've had with Africa ever since, how did that start? Africa, I know, is a big general term.
Yeah. It's a complicated question, Wade. I think when I first came, I really thought, I need to stay the hell out of here and I need to stay away from this. Yeah.
How come?
Because I think Africa is a place, and again, we're generalizing about a continent, but I think there are some commonalities about the experience. And the commonalities are that it's a place where the best of intentions from the West go to die.
Mm.
And when I had already started my career, I could see the landscape littered with the corpses of good intentions.
Right.
And so much so that it was cluttering and preventing growth. And I just thought, fuck, we need to stay out of the way. That's what we should do. Because it's not working, international development in general. Again, sometimes led with good intentions, oftentimes not, was, in my view, and still remains my view, inhibiting growth rather than the alternative. So I was very conflicted about getting involved, but when I started working at the International Criminal Court, in fact, that's why my first steps were in Asia, not in Africa. And I felt like dealing with the colonial baggage, even if I don't come from the UK, and even if my country, even though my country has also had its share of interventions that were not on the right side of history in Africa, didn't have the same legacy as, the UK or France or some of these other European countries. You still get put in that basket, right? And so you're able to navigate that. When the first thing people see when they see you opening your mouth is, the hundreds of years of, historical interventions, then it's very difficult to get anything done. And so I didn't want to walk into that. I'd rather walk into a space where then I could just operate, in a more level playing field, or at least with some level of anonymity. But when I started working at the court, they sent me to Kenya straight away. And that was it. And right into the cauldron, to be honest. It was a very politically engaged situation. The ICC issued arrest warrants for what ended up being the president and vice president of the country. It was a hell of a fight. I got to meet thousands and thousands of people on the ground. My job was to identify victims who had suffered from this post-election violence in Kenya, and there were hundreds of thousands of them. And so I was like preaching the gospel of justice in churches and schoolyards and community centers all across the country. And that was the moment where I was just like, wow, this country is incredible. I just
really
was so impressed by Kenya. In fact, I think there's so much that Kenya reminds me of the United States, like the culture there, people there, their motivations, their aspirations, the idea that anything is possible, the idea that they have a special place in the world, and, they have duty, like all of it, it jived with me. And I think also there's something to say about like being there at this kind of moment where this historical moment was very an inflection point for the country, and then in a very small space, an inflection point for my life.
Can you take me through sort of the early days and what was happening in your world and the people and the conversations? It became Amani Project.
So here I am as, an international criminal lawyer working in Kenya with, and together with Kenyans who are world-class lawyers who are taking the fight to the power and just the most inspiring and impressive people that I know still to this day. So that's my experience, right? Like I'm humbled by their excellence and their skills. And I'm just thinking, Jesus, like, why does anyone from outside need to be here? Only then maybe to be kind of telling the rest of the world what's actually going on here, right? Like, and then to create space for them to go out and shine. So I guess if we really dial it down, that's in a nutshell kind of how I feel like I'm the last generation of me, I hope.
Yeah.
And then increasingly in these next generations, for international and people from the West to be, if they're intervening at all in the rest of the world, they'll be doing so from the backseat. And so, I think for the Amani project, obviously, like I'm a cyclist. Cycling has been my therapy for the work that I do. It's how I get it out, and it has been for my entire career. I'm a huge fan of cycling. I got involved in the Lance Armstrong phase and never let go. Spent countless hours, just mindlessly after a 3 or 4 hour day on the bike, then just watching Eurosport and watching cycling for the whole period that it was aired. My days went by like this, my weekends went by like that. It's how I just decompressed.
And from work, like is work quite a disturbing, frustrating, maybe demoralizing place at times? It sounds like it must be. Or is it more positive than that?
Yeah, it depends. So my job for 12 years was really to also interview people who have lived through the worst things that human beings can live through. Over and over and over again, hundreds and hundreds of these interviews.
Wow.
It does end up, when you hear those kinds of things, it's like silt in a riverbed. It starts to build up over time. But at the same time, I don't want to over dramatize it. It was also a source of power for me. Like, in the human spirit, it sounds cliche, it sounds like bullshit, but when you see people live through these things and then get up the next day, even if it's just to provide for the remaining, family members or whoever it may be, it inspires me big time. I used to get up for these interviews. I still do to this day. I feel like it's the greatest privilege of my career to be able to sit across from the table. I want to bring my best. I want to make sure that everything they say is accurately conveyed. I want to make sure I create a space that, enables them to feel comfortable and be able to trust me so that they can say what they need to say. And that I don't just take, that I do something with that statement. I feel like I owe them something once they've opened, their emotional doors to me. So it is like a very charged experience. So I'm loath to say that it's just a kind of, emotional baggage that you get something also in return. But yeah, anyway, cycling is important to just kind of sometimes get some of process the ghosts and get it out of your system a bit.
Did you do any riding like when you were away at work, or was work and riding was something that was completely separate when you got back home?
Yeah, work was definitely intense. So there wasn't like a lot of time just spent riding around in Kenya or Rwanda or Uganda or wherever I was. But I did. I definitely did go bike riding, and I definitely did meet the professionals who are in that space. And I came to know them over a period of years. And never did I feel like I had any responsibility towards them. I was just following as a fan what was happening in these little micro cycling bubbles. And it wasn't really until and this is it's like a kind of crazy story, but in Holland we started a bikes and coffee shop called Lola in The Hague, and when my friends and I took it over from the original owner, he's a very eccentric guy. Part of the contract from buying this thing was like I had to go and visit the cow where the milk came from, like it's that kind of thing. But weirdly, he had also in this crazy contract that was like written on the back of an envelope that I had to continue this project that he had started in Africa. And I hated the project that he started in Africa. It was bullshit. I had been there in Uganda, I'd seen it, and it was just none of the things that it was purported to be, which is just an old story I'm so used to.
What was it about? What was the intentions behind it?
I don't want to throw any shade on it, but let's just say that it was supposed to be one of these feel-good stories where Europeans bring, bikes to Africa and bikes change lives.
Right.
And of course, it's almost always bullshit. Sorry to say. And of course, there's a dynamic there. I don't want to go too far into it, but like there's a very strong power dynamic that really underlies all of this international development, which is that if you go to somebody and even forget about in someone else's culture and go into your own country, you find a homeless person and you're like, listen, I want to help you out. They're on their backs, right? They're not in a position to refuse. So you can tell them that you want them to be a dancing bear on a ball, and they'll do it. Is that what they have always aspired to be? Fuck no. That's not what they wanted to be. Will they do it? Yeah, they'll do it because they are already humiliated. they're already in a situation of economic, despair. And then the thing is that it creates this crazy feedback loop where the person who's then giving the money goes, oh man, they really wanted to be this bear on the ball. I'll just keep doing this, because look, he's doing it. And so, and that's in a short, crazy example. That's my take on international development.
Yeah. And you had this insight at the time of taking over this cafe. That was that, or has that formed throughout?
No. Even before I started, I mean, definitely this is baked into my DNA from even university times. But I agreed to take on a project, but I stopped. The first thing I did was stop this one, and then I had to create one. And then I thought the last thing I ever wanted to do, of course, is to create a project in Africa. So I thought of like a way where, with the experience that I have, it would be like one where it was very limited in scope, achievable, and not bullshit. And so what we did was we created a coffee label because it's a coffee shop. We sourced all of our beans from East African countries that I was working in. We made sure that the supply chain was, one that resulted in the most money going to the farmer. And then surplus, we would add a surplus amount to give to a Kenyan professional or a Kenyan professional team.
Cycling team.
Called Kenya Riders, yeah. And then
right, okay.
Interesting. Just so happens to be Amani, which is a word that I was hearing quite often. It means peace in Swahili. And so we created the name of the thing, and it was just a coffee bag. That was it. That was the whole idea.
Yeah, right.
And I really wanted that to be the end of it. And, we could provide the money, and then the money, whatever money, and it would be small money, would go to helping them on their mission. So that was kind of the genesis. It's not that sexy or romantic, but that's the truth of it.
So tell me what came next. How did the ideas and stuff start forming into what you're doing now? How did that begin?
Well, this kind of all happens like right before, in the lead up to the pandemic, so around 2018 maybe. And then a lot of people in the African cycling space start to reach out and say like, hey, this is what we're doing. These are the challenges that we're facing. And then I kind of, somehow it just pissed me off. Wait, like you hear the same story over and over again about how the system there's a glass ceiling and nobody gets around it. And then you start to kind of explore and why is the glass ceiling set there? And then, it was just so consistent across the different countries. And I guess I was uniquely placed because I was working at that point, not just in Kenya, but in a number of different East African countries. The experience was universal. And then at the same time, this Kenyan professional cyclist comes into my life named Sule Kangangi. And he was just a kind of force, and he was very articulate in his laying out of the challenges, but then also had ideas about potential solutions.
I always remember the day that I saw the first bike race in Eldoret, and I was so fascinated to see how those bikes were going that fast. I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be like one of those racers.
This audio is from the late Sule Kangangi. Thank you to Ian Boswell for sharing these clips from his podcast with me, as well as from various other sources on social media.
So I started with this Black Mamba. We call them Black Mamba, local China bikes. They are imported from China to Africa. From that moment on, I never looked back. I'll not always be a professional cyclist, so I have to try and think how I can involve myself with the community. So I have ambitions to run a team someday. And for me, like whatever I do, like that's my ambition. But you always have to have the support from the community. And if you don't have support from the community, especially the cycling community, you don't have a good foundation. So like for me, the foundation is the community. They have to back you up. So it's a privilege for me, and keeping those connections open, it's very, very important.
Yeah, he was just, he was riding for the Kenyan Riders. So this kind of organization that we were trying to send some money to. He also started to race for Bike Aid, which is a kind of like a German team that takes a couple of African riders every year and showcases them in Europe with other European riders. So yeah, he's been on my radar because that I was following these professional athletes, but it was the first time I really kind of got time to sit down and talk with him and stuff. And then when I heard all of his ideas about how to get, to undermine the ceiling and to put a crack in the wall, I just thought, if that's what you want to do, I help you. Tell me how to plug into this.
Were these conversations just natural, just two people talking, or was he coming to you for help, or were you coming to him for ideas and something you were thinking?
The summer of 2019, and we were just on a bike ride together, and afterwards he was just kind of, in Nairobi, just going over some of the things over coffee, and I just remember getting angry, but also being inspired and thinking,
getting angry at situation they face.
The situation, but then also being like, wow, this guy could really be the avatar that takes it down, or creates a new narrative. He's got the dream, he's got the energy, he's got everything, the credibility.
And he's experienced it from both sides, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Cycling has given me so much over the last couple of years. And I feel like I've wasted myself if I don't give back to the community as well. Like, what I've learned over the years. I need to help with that.
So I was basically just like, tell me how I can help. And then, I'll follow you. I'm not going to give you any ideas. I don't have any ideas about this. Like, this is for you. And I thought that would be, if we went down that way, and he was the one who kind of decided on the things that we were going to take on, then we would already be doing something quietly revolutionary in this space, because it's not, someone from the West coming in and saying, I got ideas, and I'm just going to make them fit in, this square peg in the round circle, rather than the other way around. So you have ideas, you have energy. This is your issue. How can I help? And that's how it all started, frankly.
When we began the conversation, you said, Africa is a place where Western, I forget how you phrased it, Western good intentions go to die. Was this always on your mind with your involvement?
It's on my mind to this day, Wade.
Like here I am talking to you, and of course, Sule is no longer with us. But yeah, I see your apprehensiveness on being the face of this.
Yeah, now, anyway, it's a long story, and we've been through the ringer, to be honest. And there was never a lower point in this project or in my life than the passing of Sule. But we have now a lot of, because of him and because of this dream and because of this vision, we've created a big tent. And in that tent, there are a lot of guys holding the tent poles. A lot of guys with actual skin in this game who believe in this, like they believe, it's like it's their reason for being. And I'm feeling now more comfortable and confident in what we're doing than I have since Sule's passing. Right, when we lost that leadership, and then suddenly I had to be the one, preaching the gospel, which is not what I wanted.
People came to me like I was always like going to find competition outside, but now it's quite the opposite. People coming, in Africa, to our roads, to our culture, to our time zone, to and us having a chance to race with them.
This is Xylon Van Eyck. a South African who has experience working with professional teams such as MTN Quebeca, Team Novo Nordisk, and Cervelo Bigla. He's the head of partnerships at Team AMANI, and his LinkedIn bio says, "I create pathways for unrepresented talent, building systems, shifting narratives, mentoring the next generation. An admirable way of making a living, if I do say so myself."
And that's when I started formulating what a team from Africa could look like. One of the ideas I had come up with in my project was a collaborative approach. I've always believed in a collaborative approach. And then I went on a bike ride in Girona with Scarbo Grumet. So Scarbo is the first Ethiopian to ever ride the Tour de France. I've known him since he was 18 years old, since he turned pro on the former team. And he started telling me about Team AMANI. He spoke to me about the mission, the vision, man. And as this bike ride went on, my heart rate was just going higher and higher because I just started getting more and more excited. And he was ticking every single box that I'd put in this document that I'd formulated for my team. And he was like, "Oh, you got to meet Michael. You have to meet Michael." And when I met Michael, yeah, it just made no sense to be doing the same thing from different directions, that collaborative approach just synced, and from the first sentence, we were just on the same page.
In order to get buy-in from the people and ownership and so forth, you would have had to, had this very big tent of other people who are local, who are in the situation that they face. Did that come about quite naturally, getting these other people involved, or were they all quite drawn to the mission and took ownership in whatever way they saw fit? Or how did that sort of structure start to form?
And there's so many missteps in this process, and so many times where I had to check myself as well. And but this is really, again, if I'm fair to myself, which I don't want to be, but I was destabilized by the loss of Sule completely. And didn't, was obviously not a thing you expect to find yourself in a situation like that. And so I was definitely putting a lot of pressure on the athletes and the people who were remaining behind to step up, because I didn't want to be the one. And never, that was the kind of red line for me. Right. Once it got there, then this is suddenly about me. And now I'm just like every other, project that came before. I've learned no lessons. And here we go again. This is boring. This is not worth anyone's time. But me putting pressure on people to stand up and take, an executive role in an organization like this when they have no background is also unreasonable. And I was totally unreasonable,
Was that one of the missteps you're referring to?
There's a famous dinner right after his funeral where we had this long table. I'll never forget it. And I'm sure the athletes who were there won't either. And, we're all just devastated and looking around the table like, do we continue this or not?
Really?
And we went around the table. And then I said, okay, if we're going to keep doing this, and I was inspired by what they said, it's like, which of one of you is going to step up? Or, and it doesn't need to be one, because there's a massive shoes to fill, but then a number of you need to step up, to take over some of these responsibilities. And that's where it went quiet. Thankfully, we got past that moment. And then just by keeping the flag up, others started to come. And I don't think it's natural, right? There's so many different things that, there's a scarcity mindset in African cycling, if I can call it that. And then you have little fiefdoms and you have territoriality, and and it's all silly considering the bigger challenge, but that's just the landscape. So it's not like as soon as we announced what we were trying to do, that everyone just kind of coalesced under one flag. That definitely didn't happen. And also there's just a lot of false promises that had taken place over the years, organizations coming in, using the likeness of an African athlete to raise money for themselves. And then none of that trickling down to the athletes, and I found a whole bunch of athletes who were pretty pissed off by the time I got there, about being used and not seeing any benefit despite all the work that they put in, seeing their careers plateau at a certain level. And then also seeing, people from the West living quite comfortably, off of their sweat. So there was a lot of stuff to unpack. That's why it's taken as long as it's taken, because I really do think, from just an athletic perspective, we could have been further along in terms of competing at the very highest levels. But there was some work to do beforehand.
The history of some of those missteps from other brands and that, was that something you ever anticipated needing to deal with, or was it something you're fully aware of coming into this?
I didn't know how deep it went, but for sure that was one of the first things that was articulated to me in terms of the glass ceiling. So we were aware about this, and I'm not just throwing shade. Like I'm sure, for 20 years, lots of organizations faced lots of different challenges at the earliest stages, and we came in afterwards and stepped on their shoulders and have moved it along. But for sure, there were missteps in the past, and we're really trying to be students of those missteps so we don't replicate them.
We are staring a mountain in front of us. And it's going to take an enormous effort to scale this mountain and to make it across it.
Here's Xylon Van Eyck again.
I think the word that comes to mind is resilient. We're going to have to be resilient. Often, coming from Africa, we have fewer resources to work with. So we really have to be creative and make do. And I think resilience is one of the words, but I think we have it in spades. So it's something that I think is ingrained in us. I think we know how to face challenges. This continent has faced a lot of challenges. We have to be excellent at everything we do. Everything we have to do has to be of a high standard. And I think coming from Africa, because there is a narrative we're looking to change and people might have perceptions, everything we have to do has to be of an incredibly high standard. Me personally, as someone who started working in cycling, a person of color 13 years ago, coming from the African continent, I had to be exceptional from day one in the job, for people to believe that we have a rightful place that we can take in the sport.
What were some of the other early challenges in setting the program up, whether it's funding, logistics, infrastructure, race access? What were some of those things that you could speak to?
There are a number of different countries that I'm working in. So like if you use the word Africa, then it's like singular, easy to get your head around. But we were basically running a team in 4 or 5 different countries at the same time.
Mm-hmm. So mostly Eastern Africa.
At that point, it was just East Africa, yeah. And but still, I mean, it's a big place. Kenya is like the size of France. And then you have the neighboring country, it's Uganda. Then you have Ethiopia. Then you have Rwanda, and all these places. Different languages, different cultures, different corporate revenue streams, different expectations, different everything. Different histories with the sport. So yeah, trying to kind of get representation from each of these countries that I could trust, that weren't, part of the apparatus that came before us, that, had the capacity to think bigger, and then really cast the net out, so that athletes knew that there was an alternative to the existing milieu, and that if you're good enough, you can come through this, all the way to the top. That doesn't get built overnight, and again, finding the right people in each of those countries, with this new dream and sharing in this dream, creating it together, it took time.
What else did it take besides time? Like, what were some of the other things that you needed to build?
Well, on the flip side of it, there was also selling this idea to, the corporate establishment in cycling, which I think, I don't think I know, because that was squarely my job.
And you're a lawyer, not a salesperson.
Exactly. And on one level, I think that really perhaps helped, because I don't have any skin in this game. This isn't the thing that puts bread on my table. I think I could speak to people in a way that maybe they weren't accustomed to being spoken to. And perhaps I had to lean into my credibility on my other side, like working for the International Criminal Court and doing all these other things, to get people to maybe buy into something that they may have otherwise not bought into. And I just got very lucky. There was just a couple of human beings right at the right moment, right in the right place in these big corporate entities that just said yes. and then it snowballed.
Like who? Who were some of the first?
So the famous first one is a man called Damien Phillips from POC. Damien is like one of my favorite people in the universe, but especially in the cycling industry. And he we've been talking since like the very beginning. And we have there's this famous night where I had to wait for my office mate to leave at the International Criminal Court before I could take a cycling call. And so this is happening at like 8:00 at night. The lights are like off in the offices around me, and I'm like, secretly talking to Damien Phillips about something ridiculous. We would have been talking about, can you get 10 helmets and 10 sunglasses for this project that Sule is working on, and it's something small, but it could be interesting. And then like he was also the man where when we launched the Migration Gravel Race. Right after the Migration Gravel Race, what was so interesting was that our athletes were overperforming at home. We were just like so we had like the guys who just went 1 and 2 at Unbound. They come straight to Kenya right after, and our guys are all over them,
We're talking who came 1 and 2 at Unbound?
So that was Ian Boswell and Lawrence Tendam. They were obviously racing at the highest levels, but our guys were there. Yeah. Right? Like, and they had just won the pinnacle of gravel racing. They always had, a Kenyan or a Rwandan or Ugandan or a Congolese. Somebody was always like hovering around them, And this is the first time these guys had ever been on gravel bikes, our guys.
Wow.
In the mix already with the 2 of the best in the world. So we went to Rouleur that year in November, and I started to tell this to Damien, like, maybe we should formalize this, but I don't want to create a team if we can't pay them properly, because they've been told all this crap for so long about like the money is going to come if they just work hard, etc. I'm not going to be another person who's purveying false promises.
Yeah.
And Damien just said, yeah, let's do it. And POC supported, so came in and gave us enough resources that I could pay salaries for the top, 8 athletes in East Africa. And we created the team that night.
Fantastic.
And then from there, like just special people like Ian Boswell was so touched by his experience in Kenya, was just starting to open up, and he was at the pinnacle at that point, right? He just had one Unbound, everyone was calling him.
Yeah.
He was saying crazy things like, I'll just give you like my salary that I'm getting from Specialized. And I was like, no, just be our ambassador. That's all I need from you. Keep your money. And he called Rob Gitalis from Factum. He called Geraldine Bergeron from SRAM. And somehow, these 2 crazy people also got on board, and provided us with the material so that we could compete like from like, with the best. And it just all started to kind of come together. And it was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Skabu Girmay is the first and only ever Ethiopian to race the Tour de France, at least at the time of this recording. And just a couple years ago, he finished in an extraordinary 15-year professional career with teams like MTN Quebeca, Lamprey, and Green Edge. After Sule's untimely death, Skabu stepped in and took on the day-to-day operations of Team AMANI.
I think we need the support. We need people to see what we're doing and judge us and tell us what is possible, what is not possible. For example, I love to have this conversation with my friends and here in Girona, tell me what is impossible for you. I'm not going to make it with this team to Tour de France. Like, tell me, like, it's what is something that you think it's impossible? Because just challenge me, because I have this idea, I have this work, we have these partners, and we have this talent, and we try to work like we have this camp and team house. We put all together, and we have pump track, we have development, we have kids racing, weekend chapati race. We try to. It's all the map is the roadmap is long, and we build it myself and Mikel. During the time, like we build those things and we getting that just working. It's not talking, like it's just a lot of action happening. And I wanted to people to support this job if it's true, if it's something that, because this is something that we need. It's unique. And also if there is anything they think like they could comment and like say, this is impossible. Maybe what about this? What about you do this? And there's a people sending us also message. So this is something that I need help. Even like our weakness, our good things both together helps us together, right? But with supporting Jay-Z and everything, for me, it's as a Team AMANI, we don't really need it. But as a Team AMANI, thanks to our partners, we have more than what we need, totally honestly, because we have what Israel ride, exactly the same. We have Shram, that what Jumbo ride.
You have the best, and you need the best to win, and that's what you're after. Hey, it's great.
Yeah, it is a big credit to them though. It's amazing how much they believe in the project and what they are investing. And the biggest thing is here, man. It's for me. It's that's why I have big hearts to those brands. It's they invest before people see. Like now, people try to come to us like, you guys become the first women African continental team. Like it's big and smart. You guys watch but those partners was with us when we were. Like no one, like it's like when people doesn't see, it's just like I have a big respect to them. It's and heart. It's what they have done, and I think it's a long journey with them also to be able to be in the top. So it's amazing,
Why did you focus on 4 or 5 countries in East Africa? Rather than maybe just Kenya, where, you said that bike ride sort of shaped a lot of the early decisions and vision. Why did you choose a bunch versus one?
I don't know. I mean, probably for selfish reasons, like I was working in the other countries as well.
Okay.
And I knew that it was a similar story in these other countries. And I kind of thought there's strength in numbers. There's a very interesting story that Lachlan told me early on in the project. Lachlan Morton, who's been also one of these amazing humans that's done a lot to help us get eyeballs on what we're doing. And he was at the time kind of going back and forth between working with us and also working with Esteban Chavez's project in Colombia. And I think that project was called FUN. And I think within the first 2 years or something, they had managed to put like 6 people in the world tour with similar resources. And so the question was like, okay, what's the difference? And so we really kind of explored and really went deep on it to figure out, what kind of magic sauce are they on? And we came down to, they had for auditions for a 10-person team, they had 600 riders to choose from. Comparison, we had 30 riders to choose from for the same person squad. So 30 to 600. So then for me, the challenge was set. I was like, okay, what we need to do is get to 600. So let's send out the apostles. Let's start preaching the good news. And then, let's increase the talent pool. And then from there, we will be able to kind of sharpen the sword and have athletes compete at the highest levels.
This podcast is fully funded by our members at Escape Collective. In fact, all of our content on our website and our podcast network is 100% supported by our members who believe that cycling media should be independent from the sport and industry we cover, and that we should exist to serve you rather than live or die by our ability to be a platform for the sole purpose of selling you more stuff. If you enjoy this podcast or any of our other work and believe in our mission of independence, please go to escapecollective.com/join and become a member today. Thank you for your support. You may have heard of the Migration Race before. It's a 4-stage, 650-kilometer gravel stage race set against the backdrop of the rugged and untamed Masai Mara in Kenya. But it's not just a race for the wealthy tourists who want a taste of riding in Africa. it has a much greater and more important purpose.
So when we were sitting down and looking at the landscape, we saw that this was one of the number one issues, which is access to racing opportunities. It's still what I call the exam question. This is the one that we're sitting down trying to solve. How do we give our athletes access to top flight racing competition so that they can be like for like against the Belgian kid? The Belgian kid, of course, can fall out of bed into a bike race and then fail, and then fall back into bed with his mom feeding him pea soup and telling him that he's special and then, just try again the next day. Our riders, the best in Africa, can go to, for example, let's say the Tour of Rwanda in the beginning of the year. They may not race again until their national championships in July. And then maybe if they get an invitation, the African championships or the world championships at the end of the year. That's their whole season. How can they possibly compete in cycling of all things, right? This isn't running where you can compete against the clock. In cycling, you're only as good as the people you're racing against. And you need, 100 fails at least before you do anything. And in a career that I just explained, you could go your whole career and not get 100 fails. So how do we create this, right? Like, how do we get, and looking at the model and then, people taking a couple of riders and just plopping them into Europe and seeing what happens, and then getting pat on the back because it's the first African in whatever race and blah, blah, blah. And everyone's happy, but nothing changes. And this pressure packed audition where a kid is brought, he doesn't speak the language. The food is new. He doesn't know where he is. He's never gone and stayed in an Airbnb before. He's never opened a bank account, never shopped at a little. All of these are, marginal differences that stack up against, again, a competition that is decided by marginal differences. So yeah, to answer your question, we thought, what if we turn the tables? We invite the best in the world to come to Kenya and experience these marginal differences, but from the other way around, where you feel a little bit uncomfortable because you have ideas about Africa and you don't know, all these spaces look completely different to you. Are they up to something? Are they supporting me? I don't know, The languages are different, everything. You don't feel exactly the same. The time zones are different. And how do you compete? Well, the answer is very clear. It was such an interesting experiment. The answer is that they underperform and our riders overperform.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like you said.
What a comparative advantage it is to be European in this sport. Right? Yeah. So anyway, that is the fundamental underlying logic behind the migration gravel race. It's still to this day an opportunity for us to also, instead of it's very expensive to send athletes to Europe, so we can have all of the most promising development athletes come to this race and then see how they go. And then we can decide, who's really up for it and who's worth further investment, etc. But yeah, that's the story of the race.
Here's Zylan Van Eyck again.
One of the things we will bring is a split between taking the athletes to race really high competitive racing in Europe and also racing in Africa. I saw you at the Nedbank Gravel Burn and just seeing all those top riders here in South Africa, in my country, all of a sudden, I'm not using extra energy to think about language, translating it like a European language, how to go to the store, how to all those little things that take extra energy.
Did you ever take a step back to think is a race team the best use of what we can do here? Maybe being a race organizer in Africa is something that might, or setting up some sort of, cycling pathway, which arguably this is. Was there any other considerations on what could be done, or you kind of trying to tackle them all?
This is the big criticism I think you can make, and I invite you to do so. We did tackle them all, right? We went after everything at once to try to create an ecosystem that thought about athlete development and having a permanent facility, which we built in E10, the home of champions in Kenya. They organize these bike races, not just the migration gravel race, but now we have, a race series in Kenya that's financed by Kenyan corporates that, has 1,000 kids on their bikes 4 times a year, and adults and stuff, just building out an amateur base, not really, professionals go because there's good prize money, but the whole idea there is to kind of get in people's minds that this is a leisure activity for middle-class people, just like it is in the West, and you can spend your money out here, you can experience your own country, so we can build out fan base and the consumer base, etc., so that our partners also have a business case for supporting us. And then we have a professional team and a development team. So 3 pillars of what we're doing, and it is a lot.
Sometime in 2022, a cryptic email came into Mikel's inbox that asked him to sign a non-disclosure agreement.
So I opened it up, and it was a real NDA, and I signed it. And then it just led to this kind of crazy whirlwind 3 months where Meta wanted to use our athletes to sell the metaverse.
Yes.
And they shot this crazy commercial, spent millions of dollars doing it. And then it was like airing in the United States during big sporting events and stuff for 2 months.
Sarah, let me tell you a story. We are cyclists. And we have a dream. We come from far away. Uganda.
Rwanda. Kenya.
We've always been cyclists. But together, we are Team AMANI. Traveled to Masaka. Started pushing each other. Sule says, one day, Team AMANI will ride the Tour de France. We all said it, believed it, worked for it, no matter how far away it seemed. Till one day, a door cracked open.
To build a permanent home for the team, Mikel secured a major partnership with Meta. The deal used the athletes' likenesses for the campaign, and in exchange, they provided the funds to purchase land in Iten, the famous home of champions in Kenya's Rift Valley.
In 2,400 meters, you enter the town. It's got like a King Kong arch that says home of champions. It's really amazing. And there's something in the water there. Like everybody is just about it. As soon as you come, you'll just see hundreds of runners, Europeans following them and stuff, just like trying to eat what they eat and sleep what they sleep. And
a total reversal, hey? Like of athletes going to Europe versus now they're coming there now, hey?
Exactly. And we wanted to tap into that self-confidence because it wasn't so long ago that those athletes faced something similar, where they were told they didn't belong, that the height of human pinnacle, the pinnacle of human achievement was actually, Europeans, in the long distance running, because of they have stronger mental acuity and various other nonsense. So yeah, we wanted to plant a flag for cycling in that space, and that's what we've done. So we have at the moment a housing facility that houses about 40 athletes. We had Velo Solutions from Switzerland come and build a world-class pump track in the center of the property. And as we speak right now, if you went there, you would see probably 50 to 100 kids just like mashing it on this pump track. And then the Team AMANI and Black Mamba athletes live in this and train in this facility.
All from the different countries that are represented in Team AMANI. Yeah, right. Okay. Are there any cultural differences that are meaningful to be able to do that? Or is it quite simple, like, Americans and Canadians? No, it's fine.
Definitely not. No,
definitely complications.
Yeah, huge complication. I mean, at the moment, for example, there's like a war between Rwanda and Congo, and we have Congolese and Rwandans in the house. But it's also kind of a interesting human experience when you see that sport sometimes transcends this stuff, Whereas the athletes, like the countries may be at war, but the athletes are totally happy with each other and friends, etc. They get on, and it doesn't bother them at all.
They've got the same mission. Hey?
It bothers what's happening to their people, but the interpersonal relationship, they're not going to be vilified. They're not going to make enemies out of these people just because they're told to. The same thing is happening with respect to Ethiopia and Eritrea. But those two, the athletes from Tigray and the athletes from Eritrea, they speak the same language. And despite the fact that they're told that this is the enemy, etc., they have cycling in common. They have a language in common. They have culture. They have food. I have so many more things in common than conflict, which then, the idea of Amani as peace, like really starts to kind of resonate, I think, with some of our athletes.
And how do you go with the language barriers of all these different cultures?
Yeah, I mean, we're now trying to spend a lot of resources on education, but not traditional education, sport-focused education. So like the intangibles, we even created a thing called the Spoke Academy, which is like a play on the word of, spoke from the bicycle wheel and speaking. We just had one of the graduates from that academy, Zavarine Nerere, who is our biggest star. She was at Roulette, sitting on stage, presenting about, how we're launching the first ever women's continental team in Africa, and with a crowd of 200-300 people. She didn't speak one word of English a year and a half ago. Not one word.
Is that right?
And now she's like just loving it, like living the dream in London, So, again, it's just for me, every time we create these opportunities, I just see so many hands grabbing them. And there's nothing more motivating for me than that,
Tell me about how the women's continental team came about and why that was the first step into, entering these ambitions, and why did that make sense for you guys?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting trajectory, because none of this, it's not like there was a grand plan 10 years ago that we're just kind of like secretly playing 3D chess and all of this is like working out as exactly as we always thought, I wish I could claim credit for that, but that's not what's happening here. I think it's much more fluid, right? And we went to gravel because gravel was the most, so again, identifying the problems. Road cycling is probably got the highest barriers to entry, mainly because you can't line up against the best in the world. There's many things that will stop you. Like Wade, me, we can't just go and race against Pogačar if we feel like it. You know what I mean? But in gravel you can, crazily enough. It's starting to go down the route of the UCI, playing these barriers and different start pens and stuff. But when we started, that wasn't the case. Whoever the best is in the world, you can put your bike right next to them. And if they blow your wheels off, that's how it happens. But if you stay on, you must be special as well. Right. So that's why we chose gravel. And also because there's a lot of gravel to exploit in East Africa. So we saw that it could also be a kind of epicenter for international gravel racing. But the thing is that we had a lot of athletes on the continent who were basically saying, we love what you're doing, but we don't want to give up wholesale on our road dream. And these were some of the best athletes in the continent. And so we were like, okay, well, rather than telling you need to, which again is not what we want to be, and telling people because we have the resources, we'll tell you what to do. We were the ones who changed. So we said, okay, fine. If you want to do road, then let's do road too. So from a development perspective, we're trying to create these athletes who are like kind of Vanderpoels, where like they start off road, they develop the skills that they need to be able to handle the bike, and then they're transitioning to the road. But the class that we inherited were all just only road, right? So they can do amazing things going up a hill, world-class things up a hill, but then going down the hill are losing that advantage because no investment had been made on the bike handling and various other things. So yeah, we basically put our heads together, especially Skabu Gamai, who came on board at the beginning of last year. That was a game changer for us. He's a guy who is the second African to ever complete a Tour de France, the first in Ethiopia. He had a crazy dream. Everyone told him it was impossible. He came from a similar village that all of our athletes came from.
I mean, I see the reality, and nobody understand like what it looks like, my family, how I grow up, and that is a powerful tool to use it to be able to achieve in sport. I had one thing is really strong, and I still working with every athlete, is hunger, how much you wanted. This is something that I try to create within AMANI project, because you could do whatever the best coach you are. You can train them, you can build the muscle, you can teach them the nutrition and everything, but you cannot create the hunger. No. You need to come halfway, just chase it how much you wanted, and like then we could invest in you and get there to the top of the mountain, and like to get to the top of the sport.
He just refused to accept it, and then just went, like on a rocket ship to the very top of the sport. His involvement and his leadership is critical, right? Like when athletes come and tell us it's hard, he's like, he does like one of these and he's like, yeah, it's hard. And if it's too hard for you, then get out of the way. Someone else will take your spot.
I started the journey from Ethiopia. I wanted to go to Switzerland and go more. But from that, I think I created the dream that I wanted to Tour de France, because I see people that started from their journey just achieve to Tour de France. So that was the biggest turning point for me. Then when I come back home, there was impossible for many people to say, I wanted to Tour de France, and also for myself to converse like this is possible, because already in Switzerland, I was struggling. The weather is really bad. It's cold. The peloton is different. The racing is so hard. It was racing in Belgium, France. It's crazy. It's you're not making results. You're just surviving, and on that kind of situation, I was never give up. I was still chasing that. I wanted to Tour de France, because that was a strong point of my strength, I would say. Like, I didn't give up there, because in my situation in that time, people, when you come to Europe, they told you don't come back, run away, like you are in Europe, you just nobody sees the future, even people who close to you. It's like, and I was saying no to myself. I was saying no to everyone. Just I'm gonna make it. It's just I had that strong belief within me, and I was just chasing. Like hungry animal, just to be able to do it.
Ashley Moolman-Passio is one of the veteran top riders in the Women's World Tour who grew up in South Africa. She was named as a mentor and an advisor to the team when the announcement came out a few weeks ago that Team AMANI would be registering the first ever continental African women's team with a goal to race the Tour de France Femmes in 3 years.
I started to kind of fill that space that I was so badly wanted to fill in terms of paying it forward to Africa by creating, or partnering with other people, for example, in a township in South Africa in Khayelitsha, to use cycling as a form of empowerment to help the girls build their confidence. But that's very much a grassroots project and is also very much focused on education. So I became aware of Team AMANI, when it first started, because already Michael's outbox thinking about not necessarily always bringing African talent to Europe, but, bringing, the high level of racing to Africa through a gravel race. I really liked the way he was thinking. I was aware of a project, but I didn't really know, who exactly was involved. And then, this year when the opportunity came to really meet with Michael, and to become more involved in the team, it really just felt like a career-long dream, coming true.
Your role is providing some critical insider knowledge and being able to look at the athletes and tell the team exactly, who's worth investing in right now versus who needs more development. Beyond just the numbers, what specific traits and intangibles do you or will you be looking for in these riders to see if they can handle the pressure at the highest level?
Yeah, of course, numbers are the first, important, measurement to look at. But of course, numbers are also not always everything. But for me, it's really important to see their mentality and their motivation. So I am a true believer that to become one of the best cyclists in the world, or to have a successful career in professional cycling, your motivation is a key factor, and especially when you're coming from continents like Africa, where it's that much more challenging, to be successful on a totally different continent, totally different cultures. So I always look, to see if the riders are intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated. And to me, I honestly believe that intrinsic motivation is the most sustainable form of motivation, because, it's really a burning desire from within to either, grow in strength, become a better person, grow through the sport, rather than just looking at rewards through results or material things, because if cycling is never going to be an easy career, there will always be challenges. And if you have an injury or you have a big challenge to overcome and you're just motivated by the results and the rewards, then, overcoming that challenge will always be very difficult. So for me, when I notice riders that really seem to have that real intrinsic desire, to become the best cyclist they can be, that's a real standout for me. That's always, the blue sky scenario. But yeah, I'm also looking at, just generally their attitude towards training, towards, how determined, perseverance, which in general, is not, it's quite a common trait, obviously, in African people, to have resilience and perseverance. I mean, their lifestyles are often quite challenging. If we look at a lot of the riders coming from Ethiopia, where their country, is experiencing war at this point in time. So yeah, I mean, it's those kind of personality traits and mentality that I'm looking at as well.
With the 3-year goal to get to the Tour de France Femmes, as yourself who has experience and knows what it takes to race at the highest level, do you think the timeline's realistic, and what are the biggest gaps that need to be filled to be competitive by 2028?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an ambitious goal, but I like ambitious goals. I'm also a big thinker, a big dreamer. And yeah, I mean, this is not only a dream, a lot has been invested and put in place. There's great support from amazing partners, which is now helping to fast track the progress of these riders. And the reality is, Team AMANI has decided to focus on the women's team because the women are just that much closer to the level. Their power data is really impressive. There's also, no secret that the biggest strength of a lot of these members of the team is climbing. The Ethiopians in particular are showing really good numbers when it comes to climbing. They grow up at altitude. They're training in the mountains at altitude on a day-to-day basis. So it's a natural strength of theirs. So yeah, I think it's ambitious, but it's not impossible. And of course, this next year in 2026 will be an important year to determine just how much work needs to be done in order to realize that goal. So, we're putting together, and that's where I'm very heavily involved, is helping the team put together a really nice race program for the girls, getting the starts at some really good European races, but also trying to make sure that we find the balance and not throwing them, too much into the deep end. So finding races where they potentially can really feel realistically that they're going for a good result, and good result might only be, let's say, a top 10, but, really going for results, and then other races where they might be a bit out of their depth and it's going to be more of a struggle. So we need to find that balance. And I think the most important thing we need to understand in this coming year is, how quickly the girls take to the dynamics of the European peloton. So we're very confident in their ability, their strength, their potential through the testing that's already been done and the training that they're busy doing on a day-to-day basis. But I think the big thing we need to really see is, how they fit into the peloton, how they fit into positioning themselves, bunch positioning, being at the right place at the right time. Another big thing is focusing on nutrition, because that's something that is a real, still a little bit of a challenge, with these riders. If you come from an African culture where it's, living day to day, hand to mouth, then the thought of just eating extra food, even though you're not feeling hungry is very foreign thought for them, So that's even something that's very important to try and really get through in the riders' minds, is that you can't wait until you feel like you need food. You need to continue eating and fueling throughout the race. So those are the two big things that we're really going to need to see and then work on as much as we can, as rigorously as we can this season. And then obviously after this next season and next year, we'll be able to see how much more needs to be done or how close we are. But as I said, I'm all for ambitious goals, and just seeing the mentality of the riders already. They are hungry, and I'm certain that we'll be able to achieve the goal. If I just use a real life example of, Zabarine, the Rwandan, who will be, team leader of the women's team, who came over to London for the Relais Live. And I was spending a fair amount of time with her in London, and we're navigating the underground. And I said to her, so how does it feel, to be here in London? And is this a bit scary, being down here under the ground, getting on a train, how are you feeling? Because she looked super relaxed. So I was really surprised to see how relaxed she was. And she said to me, you know what? Yeah, if I was here on my own, it would be very scary. But when I'm with all of you, I feel safe because you are my family, and that was just an example. And then to go on to have to be, in front of on a stage in front of a crowd of people to speak English, which is not her first language. She didn't even speak English very well a year ago, to have to go and speak on the stage in front of the people. Just the fact that she feels safe, that she feels, supported. She was able to, overcome that massive challenge. And that's just an example. Now, if that's just speaking on the stage, which I think is even more intimidating than getting on her bike, because her bike is something she does on a day-to-day basis. Like, imagine how much better these riders can do when they feel safe and they feel supported and they feel understood. They line up on the start line in Europe, which is foreign to them, and they'll have a different level of confidence. So it's already speaking volumes, as to the success of what Team AMANI is creating.
And we laid out the plan. And the plan was, to get to the top, also in the road. Over 10 years is we call it the moonshot. We organized all of our corporate partners. We all met at Rafa HQ last year, and we laid out this moonshot dream with all these milestones in between, like what we could achieve with the resources we would need along the way in order to continue the trajectory of growth. And the first milestone was to be the best in Africa. We said we would aim to do that in the first 2 years. And so this was the first year, 2025, of this new trajectory. We started a men's continental team flagged out of Rwanda. And we didn't even register the women because there was no continental racing for women. So it didn't make sense to waste the money on just registering them if there were no racing that they could access. It turns out a race did come up for the women in Namibia, but they let us enter it anyway without the registration. Long story short, at the end of the year, the men were, according to the UCI, second best team in Africa, but the women were, they went to Namibia and they really did well. So they were racing against national teams. It was the only, continental race on the continent. So you can imagine everyone turned up. And we won first, second, and third. We won first by 10 minutes. We won all the jerseys. It was strong. And we just said, okay, well, the ladies got there first, so now we're prioritizing them, we're going to put our resources behind them. And then it started to make, part of the experience that I had as well is that I could see that it's very difficult for corporates to get their head around our timescale. Because the ladies did and demonstrated what they demonstrated, but also then we took a deeper dive with all of our performance people, looking at their numbers and feeling really bullish about what they were able to do if they have access to the right level of racing, can reduce the timescale of them being able to get at least an invite as an all-African team to the biggest race in the world in 3 years. Yeah. And So our strategy is basically use that 3 windows where the ladies on the narrow shoulders will bear the burden of performance, bringing return for our corporate investors, etc. And then the men, we released the athletes who are over 23. Now we're just focused on creating a core unit that in 6 years' time can go out and also compete at the highest levels. But they'll have 3 years of failing in, relative obscurity with no pressure.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're going to do. At least that's the dream. We have the 3 years the women go out and achieve, and then in 3 years' time we try it again with them.
It's not that when I was in Ethiopia, in Mekelle, that I dreamed to do Tour de France. It's, then from that, where I create the dream, I want to do Tour de France because I was saying no to myself. I was saying no to everyone. Just, I'm gonna make it. It's just, I had that strong belief. It's 200%. I'm telling you this. It's because they see what is possible.
I think it's what cycling needs. I think for our sport to grow and for our sport to remain competitive against other sports, we need to bring new continents, new heroes, new stories to tell. And absolutely, I believe there's a Tour de France winner waiting to be discovered on this continent. And I don't know if there's something in the water, but I think Africa is ready to take its rightful place on the world stage.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what Michael has done so well. There's a lot of people who are criticizing what he's doing, and they're saying, well, how does he expect this to work if there's going to be no European riders or no European talent helping, fast track, the development of the team. Michael is really on the right track here, and I really admire what he's doing because he is going against the grain or the common way of thinking. But I believe it's the right way.
With the women's team, Ashley Monin-Passio is, I believe, termed an ambassador for that. Is it not within your, mission, or would it be harmful to have, an experienced pro bike racer that's like Ashley, for example, racing on the team? Or is that something that could very well happen and would be beneficial? Or how do you think about that?
Ashley is amazing. Mm-hmm. This is all insider knowledge from someone who's already at the very highest ends of the sport, in the sport right now. So to be able to access that kind of, intelligence, and have her feeling vested in our success is critical. Now, I think having, athletes like that, whether they're on the team racing directly with the team or in the DS car, my fear is that, in general, when you bring big people in like that, sometimes the attention shifts from the core mission. And I think we actually have talked about this a lot, and it's not just Ashley, it's also with guys like Chris and various other people. I think what we've really come to understand, and a lot of people don't ask me just that question. They also ask, why not just be a feeder team? Wouldn't that just be so much easier, right? And if you're a student of what's working, if you're a student of what has been tried in the past, you can see this common trajectory of athletes, the best, the most promising athletes in Africa. They go to, they get picked up because there's buzz around them. A big team will come and say, okay, we're giving you a 2-year contract. The trajectory is almost always the same. The stats don't lie. The average contract is not more than 2 years. I mean, lifespan, career lifespan of an African athlete on the top echelons of the sport. And the trajectory is always the same, which is team goes and takes this athlete with buzz, has no infrastructure to deal with said athlete, who speaks 4 languages, but none of them are English or French, has visa issues because they come from the global South, has, inability to act autonomously straight off the bat in Europe because they've never been there before. And these teams are going, what the fuck? What are we going to do with this person, right? It's just too complicated. And so after the first season, they basically say, we're not doing it again for the second season. but we'll send a film crew to you so that we'll capture a kind of warm and cuddly video about like how cycling has changed your life, and we'll put it on our socials to get us some kind of some soft credibility, and then we'll cancel your contract. But the problem is that cycling is very much a sport about momentum, psychologically and physically. And if you take an athlete who is up on the upswing, they have this 2-year hiatus and negative experience, then they're just coming down. They're not coming back up again, right? Like, it's not like they're going to, dust themselves off and no, it's over. It's really over. And that just keeps happening. So we wanted to be a team that's just basically purpose built for the shit. Visa problems, we're up for it. Travel restrictions, building a culture within on the management side that's all about also East Africans or Africans in general. The food is catered for. Even if we're in Spain, we bring our own chef from Kenya. That's what we do. And we serve food that people are used to eating, so they don't get a shock to the system when they come. When they have people in the sports car, they have people in the sports car who speak their languages. Everything is purpose built for these athletes' success. And again, let's not forget, we're talking about a sport where first and fifth years are decided by marginal differences. So to get back at your original question, what we're really trying to do is get a lot of these big icons of the sport, like Ashley, like Chris, like others as well, all kind of pulling in the same direction. Using their gifts and their talents, not necessarily to take away from the project, but to build towards what we're actually trying to achieve, because we don't achieve it without it.
Talking about the team's identity, Xylon has a refreshing take on how its name will have continuity throughout its existence, despite naming sponsor traditions.
Team AMANI is a word that means peace in Swahili. That's something we will like to keep in the team name forever, so not sell naming rights, for instance, to a title sponsor. So next year's kits will have full-on East African symbolism in it. So we'll launch our new kit, 2026 kit with Rafa next year. We have this incredible artist from Nairobi called Wango who runs our digital platforms. He looked at the flags that our athletes come from at the moment: Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, DRC, Ethiopia. And he took the vibrant colors from those flags. And then he looked at local fabrics that come out of those communities and took symbols from those fabrics and started doing sketches, of what was important to us as a team, like a clear distinction from, what a normal World to Cycling kit would look like.
The UCI's World Cycling Center has looked to have been successful in developing athletes from Africa and elsewhere, at least from where I sit on the outside. I mean, Skabu Girmay, Biniam Girmay, Chris Froome, Daniel Teklehaimanot, and the list of African and other athletes goes on and on. Is this a program that Team AMANI works with in any way, or does it sit outside of your remit?
There's a lot. A lot of people came through that project who are currently with us now. Skabu was there. Alexander Plushkin, one of our coaches, was there. Chris Froome was there. So I definitely think
they're feeding you guys great, aren't they?
No, 100%. And I really want to, if they're listening, I really want to build on that relationship, because I think they're the investments that they made in the sport are considerable to getting African athletes access to the top levels. And I think there's a lot of synergies to be had between us.
Okay.
I think for me, though, it would be the better thing would be for them to focus on the younger athletes. So for us to be able to send, people who are coming through our project to the World Cycling Center for a season to just get, inundated with European life more than anything, just to have that first experience where they're looked after and they get to feel for it and stuff, so that it's not this boogeyman in their psyche. And then send them back to us. Rather than, sending them to Italian or French continental team where they get thrown into the deep end, they do a couple of media things and then sent back to us broken and off their momentum. So not to say that that's what they do, but that's, for me, that would be the great trajectory where we could have this relationship where they're also helping us polish stones. and then sending him home.
For Skabu Girmay, the rise of riders like Biniam Girmay, and no, they're not related, it's not just about race results. It's about breaking a psychological barrier. It proved to the next generation that the dream wasn't impossible. It was just waiting for someone to grab it.
People I could see in the comment, they said them, even you could do more. Like, you know what I mean? It's like they push them. It's possible because they see that someone already achieved, like 2012 with myself and Daniel Teklahamanot and other like two athletes from like Rwanda, Adrian Shutu. We were the first Black African athletes in the peloton in Europe in Conti team and racing. So it was just the first time, and we faced so many challenges there. But like Biniam and other kids, they come with just to do more, like exactly what I was thinking, like my brother, like that barrier was already, it was open in my mind. Like, okay, I could go to Switzerland, but more, because I see my brother did it. And that's exactly the same thing, what I could see Biniam, he achieved. It comes in that way. And I remember I spoke to Biniam when he was in Delco, he was in the Conti team, and when he was in UCI, and we were talking a lot, and people didn't know him a lot about Biniam, and we passed the challenge that nobody cannot imagine. And for us, it was all about survival and be in the peloton, be in the polo tour, just finish the race, help. But for you guys, it's about to make a result. It's just to step up and use it. It's like I had that kind of conversation, even like with him, Dan. He was just impressive. I didn't even expect that he's gonna win green jersey or like win classics. This is just before that. I don't want to lie. I was seeing that potential. I'd never see that potential comes from him, which is good for Africa and good for him. You know, it's impressive. But that belief for sure was a big power that opened in your mind. We could do it. When Daniel Teklahamanot was in 2015, when he won the polka dot jersey, he was wearing polka dot jersey in the Tour de France, and he come back. Biniam Girmay was 13 years old and waiting in the airport with a city bike to Daniel to welcoming him. You know, that's his story, right? So you could see the inspiration, like the change of like those things and how much they could create belief to be able to achieve. So. No, it was really like help a lot to break the barrier, the mental barrier that is possible, you know.
Who's going to be the fastest? It's a 4-up sprint, and here we go. It's Girmay launching from a long way. Girmay does launch the sprint. Right hand side, 250 to go when he hits the front, and Biniam Girmay's there at the front. Biniam Girmay is staying. Can they come off his wheel? It doesn't look like it. Girmay's going to the line. Girmay's going to the line. Biniam Girmay makes history. And Biniam Girmay breaking down barriers. What a story hearing wave of him.
I can't remember if it was a previous conversation we were having or maybe it was somebody else, but Biniam Girmay, after he won Gent-Wevelgem, you know, he goes home and there's a parade and a massive welcome thing. And I remember hearing something about the expectation, perhaps unrealistic, of the prize money he might have got and the expectation of sending that back to his family or so forth. Tell me about that challenge for the athletes.
I'll give you one example. It was a real eye-opener for me. And just so your listeners are aware, I'm learning still to this day. I spent my whole career in Africa, but every day I'm learning something new. And this was, there was a rider called Geoffrey Langat from Kenya, and we had brought him to Europe, and he was doing more long distance riding, kind of like his expertise was kind of in that unbound space, right? Like 300-kilometer type racing. And he came to this race in Italy, and some of the best riders were there, and he blew their wheels off, and he won. He won the first race that he did. And I remember everyone was shocked, and I wasn't, of course. I knew what he was capable of. And I remember seeing him afterwards, and he was stressed. And I was just like, why are you stressed, bro? You just had won the biggest race of your career. And he was like, yeah, but in gravel, there's no prize money. And when I get home, everyone is going to expect that I just came from Europe and I'll be flush with cash. And if I say that it was just, for prestige, they're going to think that I'm lying, and then I'm keeping money from them, and then I'm going to be ostracized from my community. I'm going to be seen to be cheap and all of this stuff. And I was just like, what? You know, it was just like this baggage that I just could not imagine he was carrying, you know, on the bike with him, thinking about, oh, what do I do if I win?
Yeah.
It's just like one of those wild considerations, you know?
Yeah. Who would, in people in our shoes, who would expect that? That's with the World Championships just happening in Rwanda, what lasting effect do you think that's going to have on perhaps the kids on the side of the road watching that, or the athletes who participated, or anybody else? Was there any, with a little bit of hindsight now, was there anything that you could see coming out of it that will have a lasting effect?
Well, I'll put it back to you, Wade. Do you remember the first bike race you ever saw? Professional bike race?
I do. It's hard to forget. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And me too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember the first.
What was your first one?
So I remember a Giro stage in particular because I was a big Lance groupie.
You were there?
And I was there. And I remember like seeing him warming up and then watching this whole spectacle. I'll never forget it, you know? And I have to imagine it's going to be like that for so many kids, you know, who experience this for the first time. They saw riders, Rwandan athletes in the race, you know, mixing it up and thinking that can be me, you know, just like I thought the same, you know. I mean, I never thought I was going to be in a world tour, but I was totally inspired by the sport, having seen it firsthand.
How do you find the time for this? You're a father. How many kids do you have? Do you have two kids?
Yeah.
Two. You've got a day job that would be all encompassing for most people. You're involved in this project. You also like to ride a bike. How sustainable is this for you personally? Or are you just so driven by the mission and this that you'll keep going? How do you see that?
For sure, there are sacrifices. Especially with my family. You know, I'm traveling all the time. And my kids are starting to be of the age where they see me gone and they're not that happy about it. I think these are the give and take that you have in life, right? And I just feel so fortunate to have found a fight worth fighting and so reluctant to let it go. You know, I think like all of us in our lives, you have a moment where you can just be part of something that's bigger than you, you know, and you decide whether or not you're ready to jump on it or not, you know, and some people have financial considerations to make and they have, you know, their own sort of professional trajectories that they had in their mind when they were young that they want to stay on. And I think it's a fight worth fighting and I want to see it through. And so I find the energy and I make the sacrifices in order to do that. Now, at the same time, I'm very much focused on, you know, developing on the management side of this project, the capacity to increasingly take over responsibility so that, you know, at some point I will actually just be a cheerleader on the sidelines, you know, as opposed to someone who has to be, you know, making executive decisions. That's the end goal for me.
Yeah, at the beginning of the conversation, you said there are many people holding up this tent, and you know, ultimately, you know, it sounds like you're working towards, you know, you not being needed. Is that a safe way to put it?
Yeah, that's a safe way to put it.
That was Mikel Delagrange, the head cheerleader of Team AMANI, who is carrying forward the vision of the late Sule Kangangi to dismantle the barriers facing African cyclists. From the high-altitude training center in Iten to the gravel roads of the migration race and one day the Tour de France, Team AMANI is building a unique ecosystem designed to discover, develop, and showcase African talent on the world stage. With a moonshot goal of fielding an all-African team at the Tour de France and a women's team within 3 years at the Tour de France Femmes, they are fighting to ensure the next generation of riders can bridge the gap to the sport's highest levels. This is Wade Wallace, and you're listening to Overnight Success from Escape Collective. This podcast was produced and edited by Red Bricks Media.